Hello dear students, I hope you all doing well and good. So for today we're going to talk about a different topic, which is about direct and indirect objects. So let's find out what they are. So we all know now that all sentences have a subject and a verb, right? A subject and a verb in a given sentence, right? So now the subject and the verb usually come before the direct and indirect objects. The what? The subject and the verb usually come before the direct and the indirect objects. Okay? So in a given sentence, you will have a subject and a verb and a direct and maybe an indirect object. Okay? We will explain each one of them in just a minute. So before these, let me show you another thing. While we are talking about a direct object, we have to ask some questions. Like what? Like this. A direct object answers the question of what and whom. Okay? Keep this in mind. A direct object answers the question of what and whom. Okay? So, let me explain. So, when we are talking about direct object, you should always create or you should always make a question. Okay? But before that, let's read the definition of direct object. A direct object is a noun or a pronoun that receives the action of the verb in the sentence. A direct object is a noun or a pronoun that receives the action of the verb in the sentence. So let us explain this. Look at the example below. Jimmy likes swimming. So we know that Jimmy is the subject, right? Likes is the verb, right? So swimming is the direct object. Why? So we said that a direct object always answers the question of what and who. So here, students, you have to make a question. Okay? Remove swimming now. Okay? So if you want to create a question, how will it be? What does Jimmy like? Or you can say, Jimmy likes what? Okay? Without swimming. It's simple. So the question will go like, what does Jimmy like? Or you can say, Jimmy likes what? Jimmy likes swimming, right? So swimming is the direct object because swimming receives the action of the verb likes. Okay? Without swimming, the sentence is incomplete. It does not give full meaning, right? It will be meaningless. So here, again, swimming is the direct object. It receives the action of the verb. Okay? So therefore, Jimmy likes what? Jimmy likes swimming. Look at this example. Sarah hates her classmates. Again, let's identify one by one. Sarah, we know, is the subject, right? Hates is the verb. So let us create or let us make the question again. Using what or whom? So let's create it. We can say, whom does Sarah hate? Or we can say, Sarah hates whom? Right? Because here we are dealing with people. So for people, we have to use whom instead of what. Good. So we made the question, Sarah hates whom? Or we can say, whom Sarah hates. So, by saying that, we get classmates, right? Sarah hates her classmates. So classmates here is the direct object. How do we know? Because classmates receives the action of the verb hates. Again, right? Classmates is the direct object, right? Sarah hates whom? We don't know. We don't know Sarah hates whom. We don't know it. So, classmates. So, Sarah hates her classmates. So, again, classmates is the direct object of the sentence, right? It is the direct object of the whole sentence because we made out a question out of this sentence. So, therefore, now we know classmates is the direct object of the hates, right? Of the action verb, hates, because it receives the action of the verb hates. So, let's talk about indirect object. If we want to locate an indirect object, or if we want to find an indirect object in a sentence, we must always have a direct object in the sentence. Okay? So, students, whenever you are trying to, or whenever you're finding, or whenever you are looking for a indirect object, you will always have to find a direct object too, because as here it says, they always come together in a given sentence. They always come together in a given sentence. One cannot exist without the other. Okay? So keep in mind, direct object or indirect object, they always come together. An indirect object cannot come in a sentence without a direct object. Okay? So, as I said, they always come together. Okay? So, the third point. An indirect object usually comes before the direct object. So, that's another easy way to find an indirect object in a sentence. Just look before the direct object, then you will have the indirect object. Okay? Easy way to find out. Let's look at some examples. Or even before the example, let's look at the first point above. As I said, for indirect object, or for direct object, sorry, for direct object, we had what and whom, right, to create a question with. But here, for indirect object, we will have to use to whom or for whom. Okay? So guys, listen. Whenever we are trying to find out a indirect object in a sentence, we always have to make a question using to whom or for whom. How? Let us explain it in the example below. The doctors gave Rick many tests. We now know that doctors is the subject. Gave is the verb or the action verb, doesn't matter. Rick many tests. So let us create the question, or let us first make the question for the direct object. Let's leave the indirect object away for a minute. So if we want to find out the direct object of this sentence, we will have to create the question to what or whom. So now that we are talking about people, doctors are people, right? So we have to use whom instead of what. So the question will go like this. To whom the doctors gave many tests. Or you can say, the doctors gave what, right? because we have tests, right? So again, the doctors gave what, right? We now know that the doctors gave many tests, right? So this will be your direct object. Many tests will be your direct object, right? So, and we said something about the indirect object. We said an indirect object usually comes before the direct object. So there you go. You have the indirect object before the direct object. Easy way to find out, right? Easy way. So Rick would be your indirect object. Okay? As it is written here, an indirect object is the one receiving the direct object. So again, the doctors gave the doctors gave Rick many tests. So, to whom the doctors gave many tests? Notice that we used to whom, right? So be careful. You have to create or you have to make the question for the indirect object using one of these two, to whom or for whom, right? You can say, for whom the doctors gave many tests, or you can say to whom the doctors gave many tests. The doctors gave Rick many tests. So Rick is the one who is receiving the tests. Okay? So again, the indirect object, which is Rick, is the one receiving the direct object, right? Rick is going to make the tests. Rick is going to take the tests, right? So always keep in mind, an indirect object is the one receiving the direct object. Okay? Good. Look at the other example. The teacher gives her students homework. So let's find out. Teacher is the subject. Gives is the verb. So again, let's find out. The direct object is homework, right? The indirect object would be students. Let's create the questions. So, we said that to create the question for direct object, we have to use what and whom, right? So let's go, do it. To whom the teacher gives homework? To the students, right? So students will receive the homework, right? So again, the teacher gives what? Right? This is for the direct object. So the teacher gives what? Or we can say, what does the teacher give? The teacher gives homework, right? So homework is the correct, exactly. The teacher gives homework. Homework will be your direct object. And who is going to receive the homework, right? Or we can use to whom or for whom, right? So, again, students will receive the homework. As we said it here, an indirect object is the one receiving the direct object. So here, again, another point to make it easier to find indirect object is this. The indirect object came before the direct object, right? The students are the one who are going to take or receive the homework, right? The teacher gave the homework, right? The teacher gave the homework. Homework will be your direct object. And let me ask you this question. What came before the direct object? What came before the direct object? Correct. The indirect object came before the direct object, which is students. Look at another example. Jack gave the homeless man some money. Jack is your subject. Verb is gave. Money, on the other hand, is your direct object because, again, the question, guys, don't forget the question for direct object is what? Jack gave what? Right? We don't know, right? This is the question. What does Jack give? Jack gave money, right? So money is your direct object. And who's the one receiving the money? It's clear, right? Who is the one receiving the money? Is the homeless man. That's it. So again, you will have to differentiate between direct and indirect objects by the questions. For direct object, we use what and whom. But for indirect object, we use to whom and for whom. Right? Good. So you will have some homeworks to do, and I expect it to receive it back today or even tomorrow. So what you have to do is simple. You will only underline the direct and indirect objects of each of the sentences. So that's it for today, students. I hope you all stay well and do your homework.